Please welcome the chair of the Charles F. Kettering Foundation Board of Directors, Sherry McGill.
I wish to welcome everyone and thank you for being here this evening to help us honor the inaugural laureates of the Kettering Democracy Prize. I'm Sherry McGill, and it is my great pleasure to serve as the current chair of the Charles F. Kettering Foundation Board of Directors. I ask my fellow board members who are present to please stand to be recognized. Ed Dorn, Beverly Wade Hogan, Les O'Hara Jr., Hank Meyer, Suzanne Morse-Muma, Edwin C. Moses, and Roberto Saba. I also wish to acknowledge the Foundation's senior fellows who are with us this evening: Janetta Besh-Cole, James Comey, Maria Teresa Kumar, Sarah Longwell, Maureen O'Connor, David Pepper, Kelly Robinson, Alexander Venman, and Christine Todd Whitman. Thank you all very much. And I would also like to recognize the Foundation's research fellows, Erica France, Andrew Whitehead, and Diva Woodley. Thank you all very much. We would not be here this evening without the amazing leadership of Sharon Davies, the Foundation's CEO and president, and her extraordinary team. Please stand, Kettering staff, so that we can recognize you all, and thank you. They are an exceptional, extraordinary group of people. I would be remiss if I did not make special mention of Laura Carlson, director of the Kettering Democracy Prize. Laura, we are deeply grateful for your extraordinary leadership in bringing this idea to fruition. Thank you very much, Laura. And we're also pleased this evening to have Grant Kettering, the great-great-grandson of our founder, Charles F. Kettering, with us this evening. Welcome, Grant. In its former life, this building served as the Elizabeth G. Randall Junior High School, founded in 1927 to meet the educational needs of Southwest DC's African-American community. Its most famous graduate was Marvin Gaye, hence Charles Yang's tribute. Coincidentally, the Charles F. Kettering Foundation was also founded in 1927 in Dayton, Ohio, by the inventor of the electric automobile starter. From its founding almost 100 years ago, the Foundation's purpose has been to support and conduct research for the benefit of humanity. In the 1940s, this meant funding science education and cancer research, including establishing the Sloan Kettering Institute. In the late 1960s, the focus shifted away from science, with the Foundation's then president acknowledging that despite magnificent scientific and technological achievements, unsolved problems still surround us. For the next 5 decades, the Kettering Foundation has centered its work in the United States and around the world on how people come together to solve our unsolved problems. This has meant understanding democracy, mature and emerging. For a time, democracy worldwide was ascendant. Now, as this audience is painfully aware, we bear witness to and are experiencing all our peoples losing faith in democracy. This loss of faith and a rising belief in authoritarianism makes the Kettering Foundation's efforts to advance and defend inclusive, citizen-centered, and citizen-led democracies in concert with others working domestically and internationally urgent. This is an urgent moment, and it is an urgent cause. The Kettering Democracy Prize is one part of this effort. We intend to shine a light on the work of those who have made extraordinary sacrifices, including the ultimate sacrifice in our collective fight to defend, promote, and advance democracy. Their work, their dedication, their very lives serve as inspiration for all peoples, especially those who suffer the injustices and indignities meted out by the world's autocrats. This evening, we honor two of these extraordinary people, Judith Browne Dianis and Alexei Navalny. Our main program will begin shortly, but first, please enjoy your dinner and conversation with friends new and old. And again, thank you very much for being with us this evening. Thank you.
Please turn your attention to the screens as we resume our program.
As far as I can remember, during my lifetime, I resisted the idea of being mistreated, and I felt that the time had come to not take it anymore.
I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities.
One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world.
History has shown that democracy is not invincible. It is fragile and survives only because people choose time and again to defend it, sometimes at great personal risk. Around the world, we are witnessing a rising tide of authoritarianism in disinformation, polarization, and eroded trust in our democratic institutions. These forces pose grave threats to democratic systems worldwide. From Europe to the Middle East, Africa to the Americas, many are questioning whether government exists to serve only the few or whether it acts on the people's behalf to embrace the dignity, rights, and freedom of all. Across time and around the globe, people committed to democracy have stepped forward with courage to ensure its survival, reminding us that democracy does not defend itself. This courage has taken many forms. Suffragists strategizing in Seneca Falls, a bus boycott in Montgomery, and a march across a bridge in Selma. Gay rights activists protesting a police raid of the Stonewall Inn. A man standing alone in front of a tank in Tiananmen Square. Families in Kyiv braving bombs and freezing nights. The Kettering Democracy Prize was created to honor those who exhibit courage in the fight for democracy, speaking out when staying silent would be safer, casting a vote in the face of threats or violence, defending the rule of law, standing up for those too vulnerable to stand for themselves, insisting on our rights, even when there is a price to be paid. Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said that courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. Winners of the Kettering Democracy Prize are those who value democracy over the consequences that may flow from their decisions to promote and defend it. The Charles F. Kettering Foundation is honored to pay tribute to their inspiring examples.
Please welcome the President and CEO of the Charles F. Kettering Foundation, Sharon Davies.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. I'm Sharon Davies. I'm the president and CEO of the Charles F. Kettering Foundation. And I want to thank all of you for being here as we award for the very first time the Kettering Democracy Prize to two deserving honorees, Alexei Navalny and Judith Browne Dianis. About 3 years ago now, I asked the Kettering's Board of Directors to consider creating a new prize to honor those who engage courageously in work to advance democracy. And I was so pleased when they said yes to that request, because the truth is, from the very beginning, this particular initiative of the Kettering Foundation has been deeply personal to me. I can't actually remember a time in my life when I didn't know that I owed a debt to generations of Americans who lived and died before me, who I would never be able to repay for the courageous stands that they took to advance our democracy in ways that directly benefited my life. People who I would never meet, men, women, some very young, idealistic Americans who bravely joined in the fight for democracy at different moments in our nation's history and moved it closer to our founding aspirations. Some of you have heard me talk about my parents. My mom, who was born into a white Irish Catholic family in upstate New York, and my dad, who was born into a black family in rural South Carolina during the age of Jim Crow. And their marriage may not seem like such an exceptional thing today to us. And the fact that I can even say that out loud is witness to how far this country has come on issues like interracial marriage. But it was, at the time that they got married, a very big deal. The two of them met in 1955 in Troy, New York, when my dad was visiting an Army buddy of his on a military leave weekend. The stars aligned, my parents met, they fell in love, they decided to get married. Their marriage was no longer a crime in the state of New York, but it still took them 4 different stops to find somebody who would officiate their wedding. And even more problematically for them, their marriage was still banned in states across the South, including Georgia, where my father was stationed at Fort Benning at the time. So I have thought at different moments about the courage that it took for my parents to do what they did when they did it, and for my father to settle my mother into a small apartment just off the base and to proceed in the South at a time when they could have been arrested and imprisoned for doing what they did. But far more broadly, aside from their personal courage, I have thought about the courage that it took to eliminate laws like that, laws that expressly were based on race, that confined African Americans to second-class citizenship. And before those laws, laws that relegated Black folks to a class of being that wasn't considered even fully human. I also think about the fight that suffragists had to wage to win the right to vote for women, and the right to have a formal voice in their government, which meant that later on, my mother would be able to exercise a right that her mother had been denied for a part of her life. I've thought about the courage it took to take a stand at times like those, when accepting things the way that they were was actually the more common course. And it was certainly the far safer course. So what did cause abolitionists in our history to fight against slavery when it was dangerous for them to do that? What moved suffragists to demand the franchise for women when it could get them ostracized or worse? What brought those freedom fighters to board buses in the North to travel to southern towns hundreds of miles away to be welcomed by hostile communities? Or civil rights activists to sit down at lunch counters or to march across bridges knowing that they could be arrested, jailed, beaten, even killed? All of those Americans were fighting for a more inclusive democracy, for themselves, certainly, but also for future generations of Americans, for me, for us. So I have been aware my entire life of the unpayable debt that I owe to the generation of courageous men and women who stood up to power and demanded their rights and the rights of others. Their fight was a fight for our democracy. I will tell you that when I studied those movements, I thought I had a sense of the courage that it took those Americans to wage those fights. But recently, I have realized that my grasp of what that courage was like, was largely an intellectual grasp, not one that was grounded in personal experience. But this year, all of us, I think, have learned about what it feels like to live in fear of one's own government, and how hard it is to actually be brave when threatened with the loss of one's job, with the wholesale revocation of funding for one's organization, the denial of access to a press room, the threat of investigation or prosecution, being grabbed by masked men on the streets without badges and just disappeared from their families. Our country has learned how easy it is in such times to actually get small, to try to avoid attracting attention, to ride things out, to self-censor, to cut deals that limit one's losses. We've also witnessed with new appreciation acts of modern-day courage. Lawyers who have stepped forward, not back. Retired and active judges who have stood up for the rule of law. A university that has drawn a line in the sand for academic freedom. Everyday citizens who have organized boycotts and phone-in campaigns and marches and more. The threats facing our democracy have not ended, but neither has courage. And those putting democracy in peril have been forced to see that courage can be contagious. So I want to take a moment to say to Kettering Foundation Senior Fellow James Comey, who is in the room, Jim, on behalf of everyone here tonight and to your daughter, Maureen Comey, also in the room, and your beautiful wife, Patrice, and your entire family, we know that we owe you thanks for your courage this year. Not for the first time, my friend, have we watched you model what courage looks like. And we know that you are fighting this fight not just on your own behalf or on our behalf, but you are fighting it on behalf of future generations of Americans who deserve the chance to live in a democracy after we are gone. So thank you to the Comey family. In closing, the truth is that every one of us, all of us, stand where we stand in our country today because of the courageous work of others from our past, and that we carry a debt that we'll never be able to repay them. But here's what we can do. We can remember their examples. We can celebrate those from our own lifetime, as we do tonight, those who bravely walk in the footsteps of past heroes, and we can summon our own courage to pick up where they left off. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the evening.
On February 16, 2024, the world learned that Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny had died at the age of 47 in an Arctic penal colony, where he had been held in brutal and inhumane conditions. His death, which many believe was ordered by Vladimir Putin, sparked outrage and grief across Russia and around the world. His legacy and courage continue to inspire a global movement for freedom.
Все, что нужно для торжества зла, это бездействие добрых людей. Поэтому бездействовать не надо.
Navalny harnessed social media like no Russian opposition figure before him. His YouTube documentaries went viral, none more so than Putin's Palace in January 2021, viewed more than 100 million times. Through his anti-corruption foundation, Navalny revealed the hidden wealth of not only Putin's allies, but also the president himself. He also launched Smart Voting, a strategy to unite opposition voters behind the strongest non-Kremlin candidate in each race. And in Moscow's 2019 city council elections, that strategy helped opposition candidates capture 20 of 45 seats, even in the face of state efforts to rig the system. But Navalny's effectiveness made him a target. He faced intimidation, repeated arrests on trumped-up charges, even physical attacks. In 2017, he was nearly blinded when an assailant threw green dye in his face. And on August 20th, 2020, he collapsed on a flight from Tomsk after being poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent. Even then, Navalny refused to be silenced. Remarkably, after recovering in Germany, Navalny turned the attempt on his life into an investigation.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Навальный Алексей, и я вам звоню для того, чтобы узнать, зачем вы хотели меня убить.
Working with investigators, he traced the assassination plot back to Russia's own security services. By releasing the recording online, Navalny exposed the Kremlin's hand in his attempted murder. In January 2021, Navalny boarded a flight back to Moscow. He knew the likely outcome: arrest at the airport, years in prison, and possibly death. But despite these dangers, his choice was clear.
Kremlin right now, they do everything to prevent me being back to Moscow, but it's never gonna happen.
His place was in Russia, alongside those still fighting for democracy.
My job is to not be afraid and go back to Russia.
Alexei Navalny's courage cost him his freedom, and ultimately, his life. Yet his own words still echo today.
Если это произошло, это означает, что мы необыкновенно сильны в этот момент, раз они решили меня убить. Ну и нужно использовать эту силу.
The story of Alexei Navalny is a tragic yet lasting reminder that courage resides within each of us, even if we are never called upon to show it in the way that he did. He may be gone, yet his extraordinary example endures as proof that one person's defiance can shake the very foundations of authoritarian rule. And if one person can stand up alone, imagine what we can accomplish together.
Не надо, нельзя сдаваться.
To introduce the Kettering Democracy Prize honoring laureate Alexei Navalny, please welcome to the stage Ruth Ben-Ghiat.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. I'm honored to be part of this important occasion. So, one of the primary rules of resistance is you use every space and tool at your disposal. In almost every context, there is a way to maneuver. And if one area of activity or one strategy is no longer viable, you find another. Now, sometimes resistance leaders must suspend their activities because the adversary who fears them has jailed them or imprisoned them. Then others carry on in their place. And even when the worst happens and a resistance leader is killed, their memory lives on, as do their values, the traditions they have created, and the information they have uncovered that is so threatening to the autocrat. Now, and this has been the case with Alexei Navalny, whose activities encompassed almost every form of nonviolent resistance. He was a lawyer, an organizer, an opposition politician, and an anti-corruption activist. Quote, "I am trying to do everything I can from here to put an end to authoritarianism, or more modestly, to contribute to ending it," he wrote in his diary from his Siberian prison colony. Quote, "Every single day, I ponder how to act more effectively, what constructive advice to give to my colleagues who are still at liberty, and where the regime's greatest vulnerabilities lie." So he was always innovating, always being flexible, even when he was imprisoned. So I wanted just to review the many ways he resisted. He pursued an electoral strategy. He ran for mayor of Moscow in 2013, and he opened up a space for opposition by winning an unexpected 30% of the vote. And others in his movement ran for seats on the Moscow City Council. So the idea was the autocrat may be there at the national level, but cities, towns could become laboratories of democracy. By 2018, his moral authority and the momentum of his movement were such that the Kremlin prevented him from being on the presidential ballot. And we have another example of this today in Turkey, where Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul, sits in jail because he can't be allowed to run for president because he would win and not Erdogan. Navalny also mobilized people. Together with Yulia and his many collaborators, he organized and participated in countless rallies against fraudulent elections and other injustices perpetrated by the Kremlin. He also continued the work of his mentor, Boris Nemtsov, who was killed for exposing Russian kleptocracy. And I'm always very upset when I believe that every time we mention Putin and Russia, we should mention kleptocracy. And that just doesn't happen. Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation used investigative journalism and viral videos, as we saw, that documented Putin's thefts of state funds and revealed the gaudy spaces he builds in a fruitless effort to feel safe. So much of what the autocrat does with the bunkers, the ballrooms, is this effort to feel safe. And the more power they amass, the less safe they feel. So in Putin's case, this included a Black Sea mansion that Navalny exposed that reportedly cost $1.3 billion to build. So anti-corruption work is absolutely central to countering strongmen. And it is among the most dangerous forms of resistance activity. And Navalny did this skillfully, expertly, superbly. And that's why he was subjected to the whole menu of Kremlin repression: arrests, smear campaigns, fabricated charges of financial crime, repeated time in prisons and penal colonies, and poisoning. And even behind bars, he continued to embody resistance, including through a hunger strike, and through writings and messages that inspired protests in Russia and international solidarity. Effective resistors build communities and they build movements. And Navalny reached people who felt despair or fear, or maybe were just detached from politics because they felt resistance was futile. Because really, what can change when the same, quote, thieving little man in his bunker, as Navalny brilliantly once referred to Putin, stays in power year after year after year? And when you study dictators, I mean, Franco, 36 years, Gaddafi, 42 years, Pinochet, 17 years. So Navalny countered this by helping people to see a future for themselves in Russia and ways of taking action that perhaps they had not imagined. And that's what happened to Kira Sokolova, a teacher from Chelyabinsk near the Ural Mountains. In December 2011, she watched thousands of Russians protesting fraudulent election results in Moscow on television. And then she began to read online about Navalny and his work. She joined his movement, and she became an election monitor. In May 2012, she traveled 34 hours from her town to Moscow to attend the March of Millions that was held just before Putin's inauguration. And of course, he shouldn't have been inaugurated at all. This was a fraudulent election. As Kira told a journalist, she wanted to see, quote, normal human values prevail in Russia, rather than, quote, all of these lies and all this filth. And really, this is what authoritarians depend on, manufacture and embody, lies and filth. Navalny was always very clear, tragically clear, about the magnitude of the task of weakening Putin and bringing freedom to Russia. Such regimes are resilient, he wrote in his prison diary, and he knew he was playing a long game and he might not survive to see the end of Putinism. But he refused to stop fighting. Yulia now continues that work along with so many he trained and worked with, and also countless people in and outside of Russia who never met him, but were inspired by him. So for all these reasons, he is receiving this Democracy Prize, and I'm really honored to be part of this year's event. So thank you.
To accept the Kettering Democracy Prize honoring laureate Alexei Navalny, please welcome to the stage Yulia Navalny. The Charles F. Kettering Foundation is proud to present the Kettering Democracy Prize honoring Alexei Navalny.
Good evening. Dear Sharon, dear ladies and gentlemen, and dear Ruth, thank you for your beautiful words about Alexei. It's a great honor for me to be with you here this evening in this hall. And of course, it's a great honor to receive this first Kettering Democracy Prize together with Judith Browne Dianis. I'm very grateful for the Kettering Foundation for the decision to create such an award. And of course, for the decision to present it to my husband, Alexei Navalny, as one of the first of two laureates. In our time when the values of democracy are being questioned all over the world, even in places where democracy once seemed internally rooted, even those values that long appeared unshakable, I am truly uplifted that a new strong institution is emerging that publicly says democratic values require support and protection. Following them deserve encouragement. This is a very correct and timely step. I thank you for it with all my heart on behalf of my own and all my family and all my colleagues who are now continuing Alexei's work in the organization he created. But I would like to remind you that this award is not for me. It's for Alexei, for my husband. So I would like to use this opportunity and this stage to make a very important announcement. The full amount of the Kettering Democracy Prize will be used to establish the Navalny Foundation. Thank you. It will be endowment, the income from which will be fully dedicated to preserving the memory of Alexei and continuing his mission. This is not an abstract plan for a distant future. I have already worked out in detail how the Navalny Foundation will operate and what it will do. Of course, one of the goals of the Navalny Foundation will be to collect, document, and present to the public a full archive of everything Alexei wrote. Many of his ideas have not only remained relevant, they are becoming more relevant every day and deserve to be shared widely. My colleagues and I already began working on this archive, and thanks to your support, we will be able to complete it. Second, of course, one of the most important missions of Alexei was involving the citizens of our country in politics, raising the level of political participation. You may not believe it, but that's almost a literal name of the articles of the Russian criminal court under which my husband was persecuted and given yet another sentence, the involvement of youth in political activity. What Putin considers a crime was the work of Alexei's life. Therefore, the Navalny Foundation will support various initiatives aimed to increasing civil participation in politics. And of course, Alexei believed deeply in education. I would even say fanatically. Throughout his life, he engaged in self-education, constantly learning something new. Even in prison, in torturing colony, he read an incredible amount of books. He made education the cornerstone of the program which he ran in the 2018 president election. The election Putin was too afraid to let him enter. He knew that educated and informed people are the best defense against dictatorship. Therefore, educational projects will be part of the Navalny Foundation's portfolio. Even now, twice a year, I host an event called the Yulia Navalny Forum, Platform of a Future Russia. There, top Russian experts, lawyers, economists, sociologists, human rights advocates work on action plan for the transition from Putin's regime to democracy. And for each forum, we invite students, young Russians from the best Western universities who want to return and to make Russia better. To make it the way Alexei dreamed it to be. Why I am mentioning my forum? Well, first, because it took place just this past weekend, and I flew there, here directly from there, and I'm very inspired by how many new, strong ideas we were able to propose and discuss with experts and students. And second, because the work of the forum fits perfectly into the idea of Navalny Foundation, works at the intersection of promoting Alexei Navalny ideas, increasing civil participation in developing education. I want to give this example to show you that this is not just about abstract plans, but about important practical work that we are doing right now, and we will continue to do. Dear friends, 21 months ago, Vladimir Putin killed my husband, Alexei Navalny. A few days later, I publicly announced that I would continue the mission. My decision was supported by Alexei's entire team and by millions of his supporters in Russia and all around the world. Thanks to this award you have given me today, we will be able to do even more to ensure that Alexei's mission and Alexei's legacy live and win, so that we may see the beautiful future Russia, a peaceful, free, and democratic country, the one he dreamed of and gave his life for. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was beautiful, and congratulations on the foundation and everything you're doing. So we've heard tonight what Navalny did and how smart he was at opposing a dictator like Putin with every possible strategy. But what, you knew him intimately, what made him so effective? I know he was a man of faith, and I think that's not talked about enough, but what kept him going and what made him really so effective?
Well, unfortunately, thank you very much for your applauses and good evening again. Unfortunately, we are not able to ask him about it, and he would answer much better than I do. But I think that a lot of reasons, and it's not about the face, of course about the face, but also I think that the most important thing about Alexei was that he was one of the normal Russians. We were living in the same house with these people. They saw how we are bringing our children to school. We walking at the same park with these people. And it was like, you know, when you understand that these politicians, he is not somewhere very far and very high from you, but he's one of you, and you can meet him and you can talk with him at the neighborhood cafe. And I think that it was Alexei's difference from many other politicians, especially in power and of course in Kremlin. And we were talking a lot today about how smart he was, and he was very smart, and how educated he was, and he was very educated. But I think that very important thing about him, he was very funny. He was an incredibly kind and person, and who enjoyed life a lot. And you know, this joy, you can feel it. Like, it's not just a person, political, like revolutionary, does a lot of very strong things and believes in his values and everything like this. But you understand that you are a normal person, you are a normal human being, and you are not able to do the same. But my husband was absolutely opposite. He did all the things, but people who saw him, they just felt that they can do it because he is like there.
Yeah, that's leadership. They could see, they admired him, but he did not isolate himself, and he did not create a mystification around himself. And so not only they could see in him a role model, but they could imagine doing those things themselves, perhaps, or starting to do. That's very beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. It was very beautiful, and you know, sometimes it was like you're a little bit even jealous about all this courage, about all this participation of everything what your very close person in the most close person in your life is doing.
Yeah, so were you able to create a space, because what you've just said, it's a very public existence, and part of it's not only the state constantly intruding, but it's also millions of people who loved him. So it sounds like one of the strengths was your ability to keep this normal family life and privacy as a family in any way you could. Maybe. No,
you know, it's very difficult to explain, because from one side, of course, we talk about politics and we shared like some views during our dinner, but from other side, he was really good husband and perfect father. He really cared a lot about education of our children. And it was like, you know, very process between us, between me and him. First of all, I don't think that he was so involved in education, but I am like girl from big city, started to tell him that we need to choose the right school for our children and so on. And he started to be he was so interested in everything new, and he started to be so involved in process. And so at the end, I was like, okay, come on, let's not put so much pressure on our children about education.
And one of the things that's so striking that that's why I started my talk saying that if a strategy doesn't work, you have to change. You can't be rigid. You can't be too doctrinaire. And it seems like he had this, partly what the portrait you're painting of him as a person, where he's curious, and he's curious about everything. that lends itself to a mentality that can be flexible. Because I think that when we look at failed resistances, some of them fail because they're not able to see another way. So would you say this was, how was he able to keep up this kind of flexibility? How was he able to keep his resilience in a way?
I don't know. That's why I think we are honoring him right now, because it was something special about him. Nobody knows. If I would knew, probably, or all of us know such kind of secrets, everybody would receive such kind of awards and become Alexei Navalny.
That's true. I want to ask you how you see the future of Russia.
When people ask me this question, they think that it's difficult for me because I understand why, because nobody understands what's going on. Russia becomes absolute dictatorship. Regime of Vladimir Putin starts wars, poisons his political opponents, kills them in prison. There are a lot of repression. But for me, it's pretty easy Russia, because if I wouldn't believe in happy end, I would never start to do this. And my husband would never start to do this. And it's very important to believe. Thank you. And it's very important to believe that you are doing the right thing. And probably you're doing very slow steps, but just moving to the right direction. That's what I do. And that's what I do because I absolutely believe that one day Russia become normal democratic country. We wish our country nothing special, no fairy tale. We just want Russia has democracy, free elections, freedom of speech, no censorship. That's what we need. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely believe in Russian people who are living now under repression, a lot of repressions, who are very scared of all this situation, who are normal people who go to office every day, and the next day they understand just for the words, or to go to the street with the sheet of paper where it's written no war, they could happen to be in prison for several years. Mm-hmm. That's why I see the future of Russia very democratic, very free, and very beautiful, like my husband dreamed.
Yeah. And one of the later entries in his prison diary, he wrote that Russia will be happy. And we know this from the history of resistance, that people find, when you talk about hope, it sounds cringy to people. You talk about optimism, but it's absolutely central. It has been in all successful resistance movements. And without it, you cannot be inspired and resilient, and you cannot inspire others. And he was able to do that.
You're absolutely right. I think that if you are not optimistic. So it's not possible to involve people in your movement. It's not possible to persuade people that we need to be together and to do these things, some of things, to fight for free Russia together. And it's very important to believe, not like with a face, but just to understand that that's right. And I think Alexei was such kind of, I'm sure that he was such kind of person, and I am as well. I don't know if I taught it from him or by myself, but I really believe in what I'm doing, and I really believe that Russia will be a democratic country sooner or later. Probably it's very tough, long process, and it's very tough work, but somebody needs to do this.
Someone needs to do it, yeah. Thank you. I'll just ask you a final, you have amassed in your own right an enormous amount of wisdom and practice about politics, about resistance, but you've been here a lot too in the United States. This is not covered in the media as such, but we're living through a global renaissance of nonviolent protest, including in places where it's very difficult and challenging to protest. It's unbelievable. And we in the United States are just starting on, we have a noble history, as was evoked before, but we're just starting on this journey at this cycle of things. So do you have any advice from how do you see our situation, and any advice for resistors here?
Mm-hmm. First of all, I just want to remind you that you still have the free elections, so it's not forever. And the second, I think that just still remember that don't take all these democracy for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you need to fight for your rights, for democracy, and it's very important to remember about this, because I understand that people who are living in free society sometimes forget about it.
That's right. Well, thank you, Yulia. Thank you so much.
Once again, a warm round of applause for Ruth Ben-Ghiat and Yulia Navalny.
For 3 decades, civil rights lawyer and activist Judith Browne Dianis has worked to perfect our democracy, to protect the votes of millions of Americans through bold advocacy, and to lift the voices of marginalized communities through her work with the Advancement Project.
I grew up in a household with a mom who was a community activist, who taught me the importance of having voice. My first experience was at 3 at my first protest that my community had been demanding. A young boy had been killed by a car. The moms organized and put all of the children in the street, blocking the intersection, chanting, "We want a light, we want a light." That was my first time understanding that when people come together collectively, that we can actually make change because we got that light.
When I first met her, she was deep in the movement. She was a lawyer, but she was a movement lawyer. She has constantly been on the forefront of civil rights in this country. Every case, every movement that has happened over the last 20, 25 years, in some way, Judith has been there. She always raises the question, what does the movement want?
I tried to pattern much of my advocacy after what I witnessed in terms of her ability to quickly identify issues and come to conclusions to help people.
We are in a moment where there is an authoritarian takeover in this country. Political forces that don't like democracy. People may feel hopeless, but what gives me hope is that authoritarianism can't exist if the people rise up. We have seen people pour into the streets, standing to protect immigrant families, and sometimes even put our bodies on the line for one another. That means that the spirit of democracy is not being squashed. all of the issues that I have worked on, school discipline, ending the school to prison pipeline, voting rights, restoration of voting rights, supporting survivors of Hurricane Katrina, has all been about the democratic experience in this country, lifting the collective voice to move our country forward.
Throughout her entire career, Judith has led, and I am so grateful and proud that her leadership and her fight for a true multiracial democracy is being recognized. Because what Judith knows is what we all fight for, a democracy in which all our voices can be heard, in which we can come together and solve our problems across our differences.
In this political moment, I encourage everyone to pick a lane and know that all the little things that we do add up to something big that will put us on the road to victory.
To introduce the Kettering Democracy Prize honoring Judith Browne Dianis, please welcome to the stage Melissa Murray.
Good evening. As Sharon said earlier, there's a lot that is going on right now in our society as we watch law firms and universities buckle under pressures from on high. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't note that it's not just law firms and universities that are facing these pressures, but philanthropic organizations as well. And so I will just say, at this moment where the Kettering Foundation is launching the Democracy Prizes, it is worth noting that that by itself is an act of courage. To encourage and inspire others to stand firm for democratic principles at a time when your organization is also in the crosshairs is an act of faith and courage. And so I just want to thank Sharon for her vision, for launching these awards and inspiring all of us with these two incredibly worthy laureates. So for those of you who don't know me, I am a law professor, which means that whenever I see a podium, I am inspired to give a lesson. And it doesn't matter if the podium is made of plexiglass. I have something to teach tonight. So let me start here. The roots of democracy, as you know, are in ancient Greece, and specifically in the city-state of Athens. The Athenians got together, they debated each other, they decided matters of policy together, the people working together. And it worked relatively well. But what marked Athens, that many people don't talk about, is that the Athenians were all alike. There was a startling degree of homogeneity in Athens. They looked alike, they believed mostly in the same things, they had the same kind of values, even if they disagreed at the margins. Now, the Greeks, and the Athenians in particular, were a source of real inspiration for our own founding fathers. And when they started their attempt at the first modern democracy in 1776, they took quite seriously what had happened in Athens. But they weren't working with the same landscape as the Athenians. There wasn't homogeneity, even if they were unwilling to recognize the differences around them. America, as they found it, was already messy in its differences. It was a society marked by inequalities. Some people were free, other people were not. It was a society marked by different faiths as well as races, different genders, women, men, all trying to work together, all with differing levels of investment and agency in this experiment. This is all to say that unlike Athens, America had the difficult work of trying to put together for the first time in the history of the world a multi-faith, multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. And at times that experiment faltered badly. But every time we started again and we started anew in the hopes of making good on this promise. And that is where tonight's second laureate comes in. It would be hard to document in just a few minutes everything that Judith Browne Dianis has done to advance democracy and democratic institutions, and in particular, the ideal of a multiracial, multi-faith, multi-ethnic democracy. Let me just say that, like Jennifer Lopez, the storied singer, dancer, and actress, Judith is a true triple threat. She's a trailblazing civil rights lawyer, she's a professor, and for her entire life, as you saw in the video, she has been a passionate advocate for racial justice and democracy. A native of Hollis, Queens, she was raised by parents who believed deeply in both the value of education and the necessity and urgency of activism. In her home, book learning and organizing went hand in hand, and her commitment to justice was shaped from an early age. As a student at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, Judith stood up against campus racism, an act of courage that sparked a lifelong journey in movement lawyering. After earning a law degree from Columbia University, we need to talk about that, Judith. There's another university and a law school in New York, but I digress, we can get to it. After earning her law degree at Columbia University and receiving a Skadden Fellowship, Judith joined the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund and eventually rose through its ranks to become the managing attorney of its Washington, D.C. office. In 1999, she stepped out on faith to co-found the Advancement Project, leaving her home at LDF. The Advancement Project was a new and innovative enterprise. She would work alongside grassroots partners to challenge inequities and drive meaningful change from the bottom up. In her capacity as a co-founder of the Advancement Project, Judith took on a number of issues that before she reached them had not properly been surfaced. She wrote innovative reports, including Opportunities Suspended and Derailed, the schoolhouse to jailhouse track, sparking a national discussion about the school to prison pipeline, and in doing so, shifting the public discourse on school discipline and the criminalization of Black youth. Through storytelling and advocacy, including her Webby-nominated video series, How Cops Get Off, Judith has made complex issues like qualified immunity accessible to lay audiences, and in the process, she has given ordinary people a vernacular to talk about injustice and, more importantly, has democratized the demand for justice everywhere. In addition to her important work in education and policing, Judith has also been a pivotal figure in the fight for voting rights. She's launched the Advancement Project's voter protection work in the 2000 Florida election crisis. The 2000 Florida election crisis seems almost quaint right now. That was the dangling Chad election. But her leadership there and in the future, going forward to champion issues of voting rights, has resulted in long-standing landmark victories, including Florida's Amendment 4, which restored voting rights to millions with past felony convictions. A truly extraordinary step in the fight toward a more inclusive democracy. And in so doing, Judith's work recalls that of Alexei Navalny, who, as Ruth noted in her remarks, inspired people to imagine a different future for themselves. I can't think of a better way to describe the work that Judith has done in education, in policing, and in voting rights than to think about the ways in which she has helped those who have been marginalized and disenfranchised imagine and hope for a different future for themselves in this messy and imperfect democracy. Today, Judith continues to be a powerful voice for equity and democratic participation, both in the media and in her work, which continues to be a testament to what is possible when law and activism unite in the service of justice. Please join me in congratulating our second laureate, Judith Browne Dianis.
The Charles F. Kettering Foundation is proud to present the Kettering Democracy Prize honoring Judith Browne Dianis.
A lot of hair. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. I am a citizen of a country that does not yet exist. Dr. Vincent Harding, an African-American historian who I revered, used this quote at the beginning of his speeches. He believed, as I do, that our democracy is a work in progress. It is elusive. It is a journey that has not yet reached its destination. Democracy in the United States has never been perfect. In fact, many would say it is far from being a true democracy because it is a democracy for some, not all. And in this moment, it is not clear that we will have a democracy for anyone. Almost 250 years ago, the Declaration of Independence envisioned a new nation free from tyranny with guarantees of equality, freedom, and liberty. A democratic form of government was established to accomplish these goals. A government of, by, and for the people. We, the people. But this new government wasn't a true democracy. It wasn't then, and it isn't now. Tyranny in the form of white supremacy has ruled since our founding. We, the people, when written, meant we, the rich white men. Democracy for some. But the people who've been excluded have believed. We have believed in we the people. We have believed that we the people are entitled to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We have believed those words extend to all of us. We have fought against the tyranny of white supremacy, and we the people have moved this country forward. A touchstone of this so-called democracy has been the right to participate in electing people to represent us in making our laws. The right to vote didn't include everyone. The founders limited the right to vote to white men who owned property. There was a time when Catholics and Jews couldn't vote. Native Americans couldn't vote because they weren't considered citizens. Blacks, Asians, Irish Catholic immigrants, Latinos, women, and young people couldn't vote. But the excluded believed in we the people. Abolitionists believed. Newly freed Black citizens believed. The suffragist movement believed. Young people believed, pushing our nation forward, leading to the adoption of the 13th, 14th, 19th, and 26th Amendments. We, the people, fought against the tyranny of white supremacy to make this happen, but it persisted. Jim Crow laws and practices ensured the continuance of racial hierarchy despite the guarantees of the Reconstruction Amendments. But Black people believed that we, the people, meant us too. The civil rights movement sought to make America live up to its promises. Because of the movement, our democracy lurched forward with the enactment of the Voting Rights Act and other civil rights laws, with the idea that equality was meant for all of us. We, the people, have believed in our democracy. We have believed that we can topple the tyranny of white supremacy and create a multiracial democracy, and we have made great progress. Throughout my career, I have worked with communities who had little power, but who have believed in our democracy. They have challenged white supremacy and those who wield power to subjugate them. They have won against the odds because they believed. They and I have a righteous, unwavering belief in democracy. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans and Black residents lost everything, and the government enacted policies to prevent their return, residents believed they could make democracy work to secure their right to return. My clients from New Orleans were low-income Black women whose society had ignored and in fact harmed through its policies. These women stood up against a government that never listened to them. They fought back in the courts and in Congress and through protests. They believed in democracy. They understood that they were the we and we the people. After the murders of several Black people at the hands of police in Ferguson, Baltimore, and New York, Americans took to the streets in protest. They believed in democracy. They believed that they could and would be heard on the issues of state violence. President Obama's staff called me to ask me for help in arranging a meeting with protesters. As I stood outside the Oval Office waiting for him to welcome us, I believed. I believed that democracy makes room for the people to petition their government for change. As those young Black people left that meeting, I also knew that democracy needed to be nudged into compliance with its ideals, and that we had to leave the White House and return to protesting in the streets. Because transforming the system of policing in this country that was started with slave patrols would take more than an Oval Office meeting. In 2018, when Amendment 4 in Florida passed with more than 60% voter approval to amend the state constitution to allow people with felony convictions the opportunity to vote upon completion of their sentences, Desmond Meade, its architect, believed. I remember when he, a formerly incarcerated Black man, stood in a meeting of nonprofits and said he wanted his right to vote back and the enfranchisement of 1.4 million others. Many people in that room didn't believe it could be done. Desmond believed that we the people should include him too. He knew these archaic laws were designed to disenfranchise African Americans, but democracy required our full participation. I believed in his vision and am proud of the work that we accomplished in Florida with Desmond at the helm. From the White House to Congress to the courthouses to school boards to street protests, my push for a true multiracial democracy has required truth-telling, what some might call crazy acts of courage, but most importantly, making it possible for the people to be heard. Today, there's a war on democracy in this country. The tyranny of white supremacy continues to plague us, as does the kind of tyranny the signers to the Declaration of Independence complained of. We must vow to fight both. A rising authoritarian regime that operates on white supremacist values is consolidating power, dismantling the federal government, militarizing the streets of US cities, squashing dissent, retaliating against its opposition, and instilling fear. As we move into the midterm elections, there is a real fear that there won't be elections. And if there are, they won't be free and fair. Prior to the election of President Trump, conservative judges had already begun to eviscerate the Voting Rights Act, opening the floodgates to voter suppression tactics, targeting African Americans and others. While federal protections have eroded, states have made it harder to vote, and conservatives have sown the seeds of doubt in the integrity of our elections. With no evidence of voter fraud, they call into question the system, paving the way for a power grab, as it would be good for our own good. This administration has removed many of the federal guardrails on our electoral system, making foreign interference easier. It is worrisome that one of the pillars of our democracy, the check on authoritarian takeover, the right to vote, is again in jeopardy. But we believe. Every day when people step in to protect their neighbors from being disappeared by masked, unidentified men, they are believing. When Black teenagers in Southeast DC tell those same men, "I'm not answering your questions, I know my rights," they are believing. When students stand up against the attacks on free speech at their universities, they are believing. When governors and state attorney generals and nonprofits file litigation to stop the consolidation of power, they are believing. When parents and students challenge book bans in public schools, they are believing. When journalists refuse to censor their reporting to meet the approval of the government, they are believing. We, the people, are believing in democracy. We are believing in a more perfect union. We are the people who will make it perfect. We will one day be citizens of a country that we have brought into existence. We shall make it so. Thank you to the Kettering Foundation for this incredible honor. Thank you, Sharon Davies, Laura Carlson, the board of directors, and the selection committee. Thank you to my family, the Advancement Project board and staff, and my colleagues for being part of this journey with you. Thank you to my people who are putting their feet in the streets with courage and faith. In the words of Bernice Johnson Reagan, we who believe in freedom shall not rest until it comes. I cannot and will not rest. Thank you.
Even Columbia.
Girl.
So I was reading the Declaration of Independence the other day, as one is wont to do. And it's basically an indictment, right? Thomas Jefferson, 33 years old at the time he wrote it, as part of this committee, he's the chief writer, basically lists all of the American colonists' grievances against Parliament and the King. And among the things he cites as the most egregious offenses is that the King has allowed a standing army to be free in the streets of Boston, Richmond, all of these cities throughout the United States.
Memphis.
You see where I'm going with this.
Yes, I see it.
He also notes that the press isn't free, that the government censors what can be published, that they are levying taxes on the colonists and their institutions, but they get nothing back in return. The list goes on and on and on. And in reading it, it struck me that it was utterly familiar, that this is the moment that we are living in right now. How have we gone back to 1776?
How long do we have to talk?
We have 11 minutes and 31 seconds.
All right. So, I mean, this is where I think we've been on a journey, right? And it's been this back and forth, and it's all about power. Who gets to have power and who doesn't? It's this zero-sum game. I don't think that we can get to the ideals behind the Declaration of Independence unless we deal with white supremacy. You can't have all of the things that were listed. You cannot have freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness if you have white supremacy ruling. And you have a system where right now we have a government that is selling America. I watched that press conference in the Oval Office today. America is being sold to the highest bidder. And when you sell your country, you clearly expect to get something in return. And so we have continuously had a struggle about political power that is about money and whiteness, and someone's got to be the loser, right? And that's the way that we have operated. And so as much as we have made progress, you know, when I think about President Obama's election in particular, that's when we started to see a spike in voter suppression. You see, Chris Matthews is here. I was on Chris Matthews' show all the time back then because what was happening was that the browning of America made some people wake up to say, we have to do something about this.
We're losing our country.
We're losing our country, right? We have the substitution factor. We've got all of these things that's about like, how do we take back control? And so voter suppression was on the rise. Now, and we've seen through the 80s, for example, all of the colorblind theory that the right, the Federalist Society started to write into law, do into law review articles, et cetera, put us in a point where erasing, for example, erasing the history of slavery is not just about erasing the history of slavery. It's also about, if we don't tell people the truth, then we don't have to repair it. We don't have to have a remedy. We don't have to have civil rights laws if we never tell people that we actually had a country that started with slavery.
Right, so this is sort of your theory of what is behind the book bans, the curricular bans. It's not simply about whitewashing history or making people comfortable, or the fact that maybe this history makes some people uncomfortable. It is about erasing it so that there is no sin that requires repair.
You don't need civil rights laws if you never did anything wrong.
So, your invocation of the Obama election is actually very interesting, and it goes to something that you said in your remarks. One of the things that the Obama campaign did that I don't think I'd ever seen was that it brought together people from very disparate walks of life, young people, older people, black, white, multi-faith. I mean, it truly was this grassroots moment of people coming together in this solidarity, in this thing called hope, this sort of elusive idea of hope. That's a powerful thing. And then what you have documented that follows is the fracturing of that coalition by design, the idea that that coalition together is so powerful that you actually have to divide it. That's part of the work of white supremacy. It's also part of the work of sexism and all of the other isms, is to divide. Part of how that division happens, I think, is that the trust between those coalitions is really fragile in the first place, so it can be easily undermined and exploited. How do we build back the trust such that we can repair the connective tissue and come back together?
Hard. I mean, first we have to, it's when I say it's hard, it's especially hard in a moment where disinformation has taken over. Social media, I love social media, but I also know that it can be weaponized, and the way in which it's being weaponized right now undermines the idea of building the collective. But I think that I have hope when I see people taken to the streets. In Chicago and in Memphis, the indivisible folks who've gotten together, the No Kings marches, right? People are starting to see themselves against this authoritarian rule. Even, I think we're going to see some defectors, right? There are going to be some people who've said, okay, you've gone a little too far. That's not what we expected when we voted for you, right? We didn't expect you to take grandma's SNAP benefits or Medicare, et cetera. So I think that what it takes is strong organizations and strong movement to undergird it. I would say that in movement circles, we are seeing solidarity in real ways where people are putting all of the division aside because we all have a common goal in this moment that is around protecting democracy, advancing democracy, and saving democracy from authoritarian rule.
What's the most important thing that we need to do right now to save democracy and to ensure that we do have free and fair elections in the next cycle? What's the one thing? Like, if you could pick one thing right now. See, like, you're already like, there are 18 things I need to do.
There's 18 things, right?
But if you could just pick the one thing that would be the most impactful.
I think, is it to save democracy as a whole or the elections? Which one you want me to do?
I'm conflating them because I am actually worried about 2026. I really am.
So I am worried about it especially because of the foreign interference issue. But I think that we have It's about strengthening the states. I mean, that's the one thing about this democracy that's actually working out to be pretty good right now, is that we are actually a republic, and the fact that, it's a very weird thing for me as a civil rights attorney to be saying, hey, states' rights, pretty good right about it. It's just
funny.
Like, states' rights, love that.
It's a world turned upside down.
I live in Maryland, so I am loving states' rights right about now. It's the irony of it all, I tell you. So I do think the strengthening of what is happening at the states, I think that our movements have to be strong at the state level so that we can protect democracy locally, because we also have election deniers in very important, powerful positions, both they are the secretaries of state, but they're also local election officials. So one thing that I always say about this election is we need more people just being the watchers, the monitors, the people who are going out and going to those election board meetings, right? Yeah. Where the undercover stuff happens that could mean an election, right? Yeah. And so we have to be the watchdogs for democracy right now. That means both on elections, but also just being in the streets. I think that being in the streets gives courage, as Sharon said, courage is contagious. But it also shows that we are not going to take this sitting down.
Yeah. I mean, we saw that 2 weeks ago on election night when, even after all of the ICE raids, Latino neighborhoods in New Jersey and in states where there were big elections, they turned out, even though the threat is real and there are real consequences. So courage is contagious, and people being there and being in solidarity is important. What do we do about the distortion in our electoral landscape? We talk about gerrymandering a lot. One of the things that gerrymandering does is essentially allows the elected officials to pick their voters, and in so doing, it really quashes hope. If you're living in a truly distorted district, you probably don't care that much about voting because you already know what the outcome is. And if you don't agree with it, there's no point. Right. How do we counter the distortion and the kind of, I guess, the lack of hope that distortion breeds?
Yeah, I think that people always think the elections don't matter, my vote doesn't matter, I'm one person. I always think about the year 2000. It came down to 537 votes.
Those Chads.
537. That's smaller than my high school graduating class, right? I was the senior class president. I had more votes than that, right? So it matters, right? So we have to underscore for people that it does matter, and to show them the results when they win, right? Will New York City have better housing available to people and affordable housing? So they need to see that the material conditions of their lives have changed, right? And I would say that the parties, especially the one with the D, doesn't do a good job of actually saying this is what has happened as a result of your vote. And so we have to do that. I think people know that it's kind of important, but they need to be brought into it and understand also that the participation in our democracy is not just about election day. It is a 365 days a year job, and that I need you to show up to the school board meeting, I need you to show up to the data center, protest, you have to continue. Democracy lives and breathes with the people, and we have to do it every day. It's a practice and an exercise every day.
You said in the video that everyone has to pick a lane. What is your lane now that you have the luxury of some time?
Yes.
You have this prize. What will you do now to advance your work?
So people may not know, I am transitioning out of my role at Advance the Project after 26 years. And so I'm gonna take some time off. I've never had time off. I'm gonna take some time off. But I'm also exploring what is my highest and best use for the movement right now? There's some things that I'm gonna be working on that I can't tell you all about. And some of it is because it's behind the scenes work of protecting organizations and our movement from this authoritarian regime. And so I will be supporting movement in that way to protect our people and our organization so that we can continue to fight back.
This has been such an inspiring conversation. I just want to say, I first met you when I was a 1L in law school back in 1999, and you were just launching the Advancement Project. And to see the work that you have done and the lives that you have changed and how you truly have made this a more perfect union, still imperfect, but more perfect nonetheless, is truly inspiring. So please join me in congratulating Judith Browne Dianis.
Once again, a warm round of applause for Melissa Murray and Judith Browne Dianis. Friends and colleagues, please welcome again Sharon Davies.
Wow. Well, as we close out the evening, I want to thank once again everyone who has taken the time to be with us tonight for the inaugural awarding of the Kettering Democracy Prize. It's been an inspiring evening at a time when inspiration can sometimes feel in short supply. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Melissa Murray, thank you for your brilliance, for your thoughtful remarks, for your skillful moderation. Yulia, the arc of a moral universe we know is long, but through the strength of your husband's moral example, we know that he bent it toward justice, and we also know that the fight that he so bravely began will continue on. For Judith, you have lifted our spirits with your frank tenacity and your righteous, unwavering belief in democracy. If there is, in fact, a war on democracy today in our country, as you say, I know that everyone in this room joins you in the belief that democracy must win. Democracy will win. We shall make it so. And to answer Melissa's question, what one thing democracy needs right now to survive, let it come down to our commitment and courage to defend it. Thank you very much.